Now, while Germany itself has been led by a woman for the past 15 years, that certainly hasn't been the case for the country's top companies. In fact, Germany has lagged behind other nations when it comes to female representation at executive level. In the US, 97% of the country's top firms have at least 2 women on their boards. In France, it's 87%, but in Germany, it is way down at 13%. There have been attempts to change that, of course, but a system of voluntary commitments to gender equality has failed to yield results. In fact, the proportion of female managers on the boards of German companies actually fell last year. Now, the government, following a push by the Minister for Families and Women, Franziska Giffey, who we just heard from, is planning to force listed companies to have at least 1 woman on their boards. One person who knows what it's like to be a woman in a position, a top position indeed, is Janina Kugel, who served on the board of Siemens before joining Boston Consulting Group last year. She's been an active and vocal advocate for this new gender quota, and she joined us on the programme here, DW Business. Thank you very much for being with us as this issue gets discussed in the German Parliament. I mean, it seems like this quota is happening. What about your experience with German corporate culture has made you such an advocate of it?
Yeah, you said it very clearly. I mean, you know, the perception of Germany is because we have had a German female chancellor for the last 15 years, that Germany is very progressive in that matters. But actually, it is not. It's very conservative when it comes to role models behavior, what men should do and what women should do. And that has an impact on professional lives in Germany of women in general, and obviously also a situation that you can feel on all of the levels and also on the board. And for the last 2 decades, actually, it's 20 years that German companies have been talking about a self-commitment to bring more women into the board positions and executive positions, and that failed dramatically. We improved, but as you also said in your introduction, we are clearly lacking behind, which makes decisions worse. We are not representing the society, and we are actually not taking all of the diversity of thinking into the decisions. So this is why I have always been an advocate.
Voluntary approach, getting firms to just do this by themselves, why hasn't that worked?
Well, it's a good question, right? The decision making, if you look a little bit into society and into sociology, people very much like always favor to take the same people in there. So if you have a lot of men always taking the decisions, they have the tendency to always go and select men. And I think you need to have a quota to interrupt that, to actually make everyone see that women and men can do the job equally good. And then you have different pictures and different role models, and then things are also slightly changing.
This quota is actually only going to require companies to have at least 1 woman on their boards. Are you not a bit disappointed by that?
I am, but, you know, I mean, the thing is, like, when you look at the last 20 years, then, of course, I mean, the women that were advocating also for that legislation, we were obviously hoping for more and for less compromises. But as our minister also said, there were still a lot of debates in there because the Conservative Party, at least, you know, some of the representations, are still not in favor of that because they believe it is actually too much influence into the private sector or into the public sector. But the thing is, like, it's in a very important step. It is a very important signal that things can happen, and it will actually show everyone who doesn't believe that there's enough women that are capable to go into executive positions without that any company will fail. And I think that's why I hope it will be a push into the right direction.
But what's ultimately needed, surely, is a change in attitudes. Now, can you force a change in attitudes through quotas?
I think you can, because if you look at other countries that actually have launched quotas much before, and also like when you think about like what has been happening after the Second World War in many industry companies, you see that through a quota, pictures change, attitudes change, people see what's possible, and then sometimes things become normal that 20 years ago didn't seem to be normal. So I think when we can do that, and we have seen countries like France, like the US, like Sweden, to actually change role model behaviors, then we will also see an impact. And that is then not only a representation of men and women, but it will also have an impact on all of the other societal representations that we see in Germany. So, for example, people with a migration background, which are not represented either. So I think that will actually have an impact on all of it. And we will see And I'm very positive that things will change.
So what's next if this doesn't have an effect beyond just getting one woman onto each board? Is it tighter quotas?
I think, let's see, it was actually interesting that the debate, after it was actually announced that the law would actually come up, there were very few in the economy and the business world that were actually complaining about it. It was more a debate that was going on in politics. So I actually believe that also there is a societal momentum of having understood that it is about time to change society as it is. But when you look at Germany in particular, there is a lot of other things still in place. Taxation, it's called actually marital tax splitting, which is something that very few countries still have in place, which is favoring marriage over, for example, and family splitting. Germany is still overall represented of having schools that only go until midday. So it is pretty impossible for both parents to work. Just because the societal structures are not there. Mm-hmm. And for example, the next thing that we also have to push is the parental allowance. So for mothers and fathers to stay home in order to get actually some money from the state should also be increased. And for me here, Sweden has shown a very good example how societal pictures can change. So
next step for you, broader change. Janina Kugel, former board member of Siemens, now senior advisor at Boston Consulting Group. Thanks for joining us on DW Business.
Thank you.